Hey, I'm your host, Mike Gelb, and this is a Consumer VC podcast where we discuss venture capital and consumer innovation. If you're enjoying this show, also subscribe to my newsletter at theconsumervc.com, where you'll receive all new episodes straight to your inbox, as well as a weekly recap of all the consumer deals that are happening. All content and episodes are for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not investment advice. Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you about aVenture, a new platform that's about to launch that's making venture capital available to the masses. It doesn't matter if you're accredited or non-accredited. aVenture provides an opportunity to diversify your investment portfolio and invest in private funds. If you're a fund manager, the aVenture app also provides everything you need in order to make startup investments, including extensive research materials, seamless transaction processes, and allocation measures so you can properly diversify your portfolio. Now, typically, venture capital and startup investments are liquid, which is a major pain point for our industry. aVenture is fixing this by offering periodic withdrawals for its investors. I and many others in this industry are so excited about this launch. They are preparing to list their first fund in the beginning of next year. So if you want to be the first to know, join their waitlist at aventure.vc. Thank you, Alex Pattis, for the intro to our guest today, Kyle Cooke. Kyle is the founder and CEO of Loverboy. Loverboy is a better-for-you alcohol beverage brand that produces sparkling iced teas, spritzes, and RTD cocktails. Kyle is also one of the stars and one of the creators of the reality show Summerhouse, which I must admit is how I found out about the brand, and now has sold over $38 million worth of products. We discuss Kyle's entrepreneurial journey, how he founded several businesses, why ultimately Loverboy worked, and how he was able to leverage Summerhouse the show, and how he got into retail and also approached new flavors, and much, much, much more. This was a really fun one. Without further ado, here's Kyle. Kyle, thanks for joining me here today. How are you?
Excellent. You caught me mid-sip.
I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
No, thank you. I know it was a couple months in the making, but super excited, and I am now a regular listener
Oh,
as I
cool.
kind of got more and more familiar with the pod. So I think you're putting a valuable service out there.
That's really kind. Really kind. Thanks so much for listening. Let's start from the very beginning. What was your initial attraction to entrepreneurship? Did you always want to be entrepreneurial? Were you entrepreneurial growing up?
Yeah, I think, aside from like the cliche lemonade stands and magic shows and however I made my money early on, some landscaping, um, I think it really, like, the light bulb really went off when I was selling Cutco, the cutlery that they, is kind of like door to door. I was just like, holy crap. I just sold $10,000 worth of knives in a week. I'm a salesman. With what I really realized is I was actually just an entrepreneur, and I just loved kind of being you know, um, in control of my own destiny. So throughout college, I ran a painting franchise. It was a contracting company that was part of a bigger franchise network, and ran my own business. And I thought I wanted to join the corporate world because my mom was like, "You're not going to paint homes the rest of your life, right? Like that's not why you went to college." And I joined. I went to work for like a Fortune 100 and quickly like became their rookie of the year and promptly quit. And I've been doing startups, ever since, except for a stint at Babson getting my MBA.
Cool. So, what I guess is your like ideation process? How do you identify opportunities? Because I know that you've been involved in a variety of different types of business, like Blown Away, which was Uber for beauty, and then of course Phoenix, which was a private wellness community, and now you have a drink company. Where does your kind of mind go? How do you think about ideas?
Sure. Well, I think of my career as it was truly just full of learning lessons. Early on, before I went to business school, I was just like, everyone's talking about tech. Like I was at a commercial real estate finance startup. I knew nothing about what I was talking about. I could just sell. So I wanted to go get my MBA, but I wanted to focus on entrepreneurship. So naturally, I went to the number one school for entrepreneurship, Babson. And this was, post financial collapse. It was a little bit of a get out of jail free card, but with a ton of student debt. And, really honed in on tech. And, by the time I graduated in 2011, That was like the new cool thing. And I was chasing opportunities that were buzzy, that were in the news, right? Like my first company out of business school was like an evolved Groupon. So it was true yield management, but it wasn't like coupons. It was, same day discounts, much like Hotel Tonight, but for restaurants. So I called it Reservation Tonight. And it was just too evolved. It was too complex. And again, it was just too kind of on trend. Like all the VCs had made their bets. And then I did that ironically a couple different times, like Blown Away that you mentioned, right? That was an Uber for beauty, which was another huge trend in the early, 2010s, right? Everyone was coming out with like, there was Handy and there was Glam Squad and there was, Uber for X basically, right? So um, I had to kind of take a step back and figure out what am I passionate about. I can't focus in on the next cool trend because by then it's almost too late, right? You're not setting a trend if you're jumping on it. And my first kind of passion was health and wellness. I kind of found nutrition just played such a big role in getting back in shape post business school. And so Phoenix was one-to-one nutrition coaching. And you're still relying on humans. So it wasn't a truly scalable, platform from that perspective. But I was just like, hey, if people are spending hundreds of dollars on like Soul Cycle and Equinox and God knows what, well, and it's 80% nutrition, then surely people will allocate some spend towards what's really important. Um, and at about this same time, I had the opportunity to join a Bravo show called Summerhouse and helped cast it. And I'm thinking like, oh, this is perfect. Like, what better audience than Bravo? Like, it's the number one network among women, and I'm sure most women kind of care about what they look like, how they feel, right? And health and wellness is such a big part of that. But it never really clicked. It just didn't translate to television, and it was me trying to get people to spend money on something that they weren't already spending on, which is you're basically trying to change consumer behavior. So when I thought about the next you know ideation process, I don't want to change consumer behavior. I still want it to be something I'm passionate about. And the opportunity to do a better for you kind of progressive adult beverage brand was just staring me in the face. Thanks to Bravo, we were getting sent all sorts of products from other suppliers. And the product placement opportunity was just massive on our show. And so by 2018, I just was like, you know what? I'm going to stop trying to make Phoenix happen. I'm going to stop trying to get people to spend $100 a month on nutrition coaching, even though I think it's a viable business and people should. And I just kind of went what was calling my name, and I ran right to that blinking light.
Was part of the reason why just, thinking about beverage broadly was because, hey, I have this unique opportunity, being on Summer House, creating Summer House, and where we go to the Hamptons and we're partaking in alcoholic beverages on the weekends and what have you. And there's this kind of unique opportunity on the distribution side that um hey, we could actually build a brand here that kind of actually, we can get distribution from the show and it could be great. And, also, have a love for this space as well. Was there kind of like preconceived like notions on your side in terms of like linking it with Summer House, or that just so happened?
We'll put it this way. When I signed my Bravo contract, the only person on Bravo that I could name was Bethany Frankel, right? Like she was known for being a part of the Real Housewives of New York franchise. And she started Skinny Girl and she pumped and dumped that thing and had a 9-digit exit in 2 years. So, yeah, like that
So
possibility.
so it was like it was like at like the back of your mind. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, half the reason I did the show is because having done startups most of my career, biggest challenge is how do you generate awareness? How do you generate exposure? And how do you translate that to a conversion, into customers? And so, when I had the nutrition app, I thought that was going to be the layup, but it wasn't. And I had to basically double down on myself, my own self funding of my startups, because I had shelled out, a good 100K to start Phoenix, and I was basically going to be doing the same thing to start Loverboy. And so, when I look at the show, I viewed it as a platform to kind of act as a cheat code, eliminate, a traditional advertising and marketing budget, much like Bethany did, and focus my money and my effort elsewhere. I wanted to create, a great tasting product that didn't exist in the market. Hard seltzers had started to take off, but I thought they left something to be desired. It's basically tastes like bad LaCroix. um, and meanwhile, hard tea was been growing, over the years, and was completely dominated, like 95% share, by one company, Twisted. And they made a product that hadn't evolved since 2001, and it's absolutely horrible for you. In fact, all these flavored malt beverages that are full of flavor, which hard seltzers are not, are all absolutely disgustingly horrible for you. So, I mean, I was just like, I got to do this. I was already the beverage guy on the show. People looked at me, within the house, within the cast, as like, what are we drinking today, Kyle? Is it rosé? Is it a margarita from your margarita machine? Are we drinking some 24-ounce Twisteds and waking up with the gnarliest hangovers? Like, you tell us. And then the audience was basically doing the same thing. What are you guys drinking? So by season 3, I was just like, how do I, you know, kind of like attack this opportunity, full steam ahead, not knowing anything about CPG, and certainly not knowing anything about all the intricacies and red tape around alcohol.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Since you're kind of like the resident bartender on the show, right? In terms of like, what are we drinking today? What are we doing? How can you then capitalize on that, right? How can you say, okay, you know what? Instead of drinking this other person's drink, I'm going to create my own drink. And I also appreciate how you went into why tea, why seltzer, how you thought there was something there that still hadn't been explored yet. And since this is your first CPG business, right? And you didn't know much about CPG, like, how did you learn? How did you learn
Oh
CPG? What was
man,
kind of that process? And how did you go from, tasting to ideating on the flavor profile and like all that kind of stuff that goes into it?
it was so daunting. You know that expression? It's like what you don't know what you don't know, and then you hear entrepreneurs all the time say like, "Man, if I knew how challenging this was going to be, or how crazy complicated this industry is, I probably wouldn't have had the balls to do it in the first place." So ignorance is truly bliss when it comes to starting a company, and you do have to kind of have that certain level of crazy to think that you can pull it off. And alcohol, I mean, look, the internet has kind of torn down the barriers to traditional CPG, right? Like, I think you've probably interviewed some people that have said just that. But alcohol, because of the way it's structured legally, you have this 3-tier system with, the suppliers, the wholesalers, and the retailers. So it wasn't as easy for startups to come in and truly kind of innovate and disrupt. So, looking back, I knew it was going to be challenging. I had no idea, and it took me a year to even just get something to a place where I could launch it. And I know that doesn't sound like a ton of time, but mind you, the first 3 months was an absolute sprint, because I was like, we're filming season 3 by July 4th of 2018. I need samples in cans that somehow will resemble what the product looks like that I bring to market, so people recognize it. And I had to do it. It was actually more like 10 weeks. So I went from knowing nothing about CPG to formulating, going through a design process with my girlfriend and a creative agency, um, and finding a formulator, and finding a way to get samples in cans and not get arrested because it's alcohol. And I did that in the span of about 10 to 12 weeks. And it was absolutely freaking insane. But if I didn't do that, then I have to wait a whole entire year to film like the making of the brand if we got another season. And by the way, when I decided to do all this and put my money where my mouth is, I didn't even know if we were going to be able to film a season 3. You don't know if you're going to be coming back until like a month before the cameras roll. I had to believe in the concept so with so much conviction that it could be launched without the show. But if it could be launched on the show, then obviously that would be my cheat code.
Yeah, I mean, and I'd imagine you're just kind of trying to produce as much product that can really just survive you those kind of like summer weekends, right? Because you just want kind of that product placement on the show, and obviously to promote like the kind of lifestyle that it portrays. But I since you had such since you were in like such a sprint, right? To kind of get that product to to be consumed on the show, right? And to kind of survive those weeks. What did the first iteration of product like taste like? Was it all good and gravy, or like would the first product just like not taste great because you were in like such a sprint and you just wanted like that kind of product placement?
Look, some of my cast claim that one of the samples I brought to the house made everyone like poop their pants. Uh, I was like, "You guys are gonna ruin my business before it even um, gets off the ground." So it was a crazy sprint, and it quite frankly, it wasn't until after we got it on camera that I then had to go back to the drawing board to really understand this industry and seek out the appropriate partners. But believe it or not, the original branding, I have a can right here. Um, I know no one can see this, but like that's the original, and then this is where I mean, different color, different SKU, but it was really, I mean, I got to give kudos to my girlfriend, who's now my wife. We got married on the show. We nailed it that first iteration on the design front, and then the flavor. I mean, it tasted amazing, and it had more flavor than the average hard seltzer. We were using better quality ingredients. People just immediately understood the value proposition. It's like, oh wait, I can have flavor, but none of the guilt, right? Like this is amazing. This is a first. And then I had to go back to the drawing board, and it took a full year until we could kind of soft launch in New York City by I think it was like July of 2019. And again, we did that on camera.
So after the season kind of concludes, and of course, like this is the first time anyone had seen Loverboy. It was kind of all throughout that summer on Bravo and everything. Like, what was then like the reaction? And I know that you kind of then needed a year to really like soft launch because you actually needed to I'd imagine get your get some.
Yeah, first it was like traumatizing because I thought I was going to be able to like wrap filming Labor Day weekend of 2018. By the time we air in like Q1 of 19, I'd have products in stores, in multiple markets, and people were actually going to be able to like go out and find the product. Well, none of that happened, right? Like it was just way more complicated, way more challenging. I was figuring out how to import the alcohol base from the Netherlands, and I had to like literally fill out like all the necessary paperwork to bring it in through customs. It was just nuts because I was hyper focused on quality, and nothing in the states in 2018 existed that was clean and pure like a vodka, but taxed and distributed as a beer. All those hard seltzers back in the day actually tasted worse than they do now. So, it airs, no one can buy it, but the excitement was there. Like we started an Instagram account, and within a couple weeks, I had 20 times more followers on Loverboy than I had my nutrition app, which had been in the wild for like 2 years. I was like, okay, well, I'm onto something. Now I just need to like actually get this thing to market.
So, talk to me a little bit about how you were able to get it to market. What did you think about wholesale retail first, or were you more thinking about selling online? What How are you thinking about your channels?
To be honest, so the only thing you can sell online as an alcohol supplier is wine or wine-based product. This was going to be taxed and distributed as a beer, like most hard seltzers, even though we're a hard tea. And I knew that was going to be complicated, but I knew nothing about it. Like I knew nothing about wholesale retail. I was very much product focused first, right? I wanted to create something that me and my friends wanted to drink, and then I'd hope everything else that would fall in place. So it was very much product first, which I feel like it's brand, it's product. Those things have to exist before you start figuring out the intricacies of wholesale and retail. And then once we soft launched here in New York, we had to make the decision: do we expand with beer wholesalers? And there's thousands. You need literally hundreds to cover the country. AB has over 500 independent wholesalers. So when they launch a product, they need the participation and coordination of 500 independent wholesalers to pull that off, which is nuts. Versus wine and spirits, where you don't get as much attention from the sales teams, but you only need a couple relationships to go nationwide. Like Southern Glazers is in like 46 states. So that was a big part of what slowed our launch and expansion down, just deliberating between, all right, do we go with the beer wholesaler network, even though it's going to take more time and literally hundreds of relationships, or go with wine and spirits, go far and wide fast and capitalize on our nationwide awareness thanks to the show. And for better or worse, we went with the beer wholesaler network because long term, that's the no brainer. There's no better beverage distributor that goes deep in every single market and calls on every single account multiple times a week than a beer wholesaler. And again, these are things I didn't know when I started, but I had to spend a lot of time trying to figure it out. And then you realize, because again, I'm in the Northeast where there's still independent mom and pop liquor stores. You realize that most of the country buys their booze from chains, and chains, unlike non-alc, you can't just pay for placements by the way of slotting fees. You have to earn your distribution, and your shelf, placements. And so um, that took on a whole new other expansion effort because if we got a chain interested, it's not like I can just drop ship this stuff like any other CPG startup. If Whole Foods says let's go, you need a distributor for every single store, and sometimes you know uh, that requires dozens or hundreds of distributors if you're with a beer wholesaler network.
Yeah, no, it kind of reminds me a little bit of my conversation with Amy from Beatbox Beverage. If you're familiar with them and their brand.
Yeah, I know Amy. They're crushing it. I actually listened to the episode.
Oh, cool, cool, cool. How they changed from going from like a wine and spirits distribution when they were originally in selling beatbox in boxes, and then they actually went to Tetra packs, and then going RTD, and and they had to go the whole beer wholesale route, and that's been like a huge unlock for their business, which I think is pretty cool.
And what's daunting though, so they're obviously a wine-based product. There's less regulation around wine-based and spirit-based products. In beer, we have what's called franchise laws. So you might partner up with one beer wholesaler and you realize they're not a good fit, and you want to go partner with their competitor, and that beer wholesaler might just say nope, and then you're literally stuck for life. Like most states have what's called beer franchise laws, and it makes it incredibly challenging to move the brand if you make a wrong decision. So I knew that because the COO that joined me had his own craft beer, brewery, and he quickly familiarized me with beer franchise law. So the beatbox guys could easily switch. I wouldn't be able to. So I had to kind of make a final decision very early on in our lifespan.
Wow, that's really interesting, and a nuance that we haven't really talked about yet on this show. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's prohibition era. Yeah, it's prohibition era, old boys club rules that basically make the beer industry incredibly profitable for wholesalers.
Yeah, it's one investor who invests. He's been on the show and invests in a lot of beer alcohol products. Was saying now, like when it comes to distribution, it's like dealing with the mob, like because everything is so old school, and there's always it's that three-tier system that's designed for certain parts of that three-tier system to be profitable, and there's kind of nothing you can really do about it or changing it. So yeah.
Well, the irony is, back in the day, that there's thousands of these wholesalers, right? And there was only like 30 to 40 beer suppliers. So the beer suppliers had all the power. So some of these laws date back to almost trying to swing the pendulum closer towards the wholesaler so they couldn't get screwed. But now, I mean, now there's 10,000 breweries. So it's swung the opposite direction. It's a wild industry. Everybody that has an idea for like, oh my god, I want to do like a vodka lemonade, like I'm like, good luck. It does not get more complicated.
Talk to me a little bit about the narrative and, having to when you're talking with retailers and trying to get product in store and kind of this narrative of, hey, I'm on this show. It's there's a lot of eyeballs on this product, Loverboy. Like how do you describe how you're able to convince, distributors, retailers to actually hold your product and the overall, I guess, story that you kind of told them with Loverboy?
Sure. Yeah, I mean there's nothing new in like some D-list celebrity being attached to a an alcohol brand, right? I feel like every rock star and actor has a tequila these days. But what we really leveraged was, and this is not a shot at any one of those. I mean, their time and energy is spent, entertaining people. I'm an entrepreneur and I've built this brand blood, sweat, and tears. I just so happened to be on TV. That was an accident. I didn't go get my MBA thinking, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go get drunk on Bravo. Um, but I've learned that you don't get anywhere in life saying no. So I say yes. And sometimes it takes me down weird paths. But, um, when I went to these retailers, I said, listen, um, more so than my D-list, fame and my, 400,000 followers is the authenticity that our brand has that 99% of alcohol brands wish they have. And it's the one thing they can't buy. You can't buy authenticity. I know that's a word that is so overused, particularly in CPG, but there's not a lot of authenticity in alcohol because the big guys still control, you know, I don't know, 95% of the market share. And there's no story behind these brands, right? Like, what's the story behind Truly and White Claw and Grey Goose and Budweiser? I mean, who knows? And the millennial Gen Z consumer does not care about these brands. They want to buy into something. And so that's very much what my conversation is about. I was like, listen, the people that watch my show, they feel like they know me. They've been on this journey. They're dying to try it. And the fact that it tastes amazing and we have incredibly high repeat purchases is what brings them back, right? And so we check all the boxes for our beer wholesalers because we're bringing in a higher quality consumer that tends to be female, which they've struggled to cater to as beer guys. And then on the retail front, it's like, look, we have a product that can be distributed in 4 times as many locations in the U.S. than wine and spirits, because one advantage beer does have is the ability to sell more places. And so I said, listen, we got a high margin product with 4 times the penetration possibilities, and in XYZ retailer, let's give them something that they want to buy in your store and not have to go to the liquor store for like a wine and spirit purchase to make their, mimosa or margarita or whatever, right? Like we can convert them right then and there in the grocery store. And it's really resonated. The challenge though is alcohol, it's very much a chicken and the egg. The retailers that get excited, they ask you which wholesalers have you already signed, not who you hope to partner with, but who have you already signed, because that's the only way I'll give you those stores. And then on the flip side, the distributors don't want to bring on a brand until you have retail mandates. And when I say mandate, I mean guaranteed spots on the shelf and in the cooler, um, called a planogram. So it's very much walking this. It's a dance between, you know wholesale and retail, and just trying to sell them both kind of at the same time, and hoping your story resonates.
Once you were able to get into a few stores and their traction, their repeat rates, they were kind of going up, and you had, maybe great, or I hope great velocities that got you into more stores. What was then kind of your approach? Was it to kind of scale nationally as quickly as possible? Was it really to focus on, I'd imagine, the New York market and really try to maybe own that market, or have or really get kind of inch wide, foot deep in there and then expand? What were overall how are you thinking about it from that standpoint?
No, great question. So we launched in January of 20. I mean, we'd soft launched New York City like a couple months prior, but we launched, of all states, Wisconsin. That happened to be where we moved production. And then I partnered up with a great wholesaler there. We had quasi distribution in New York City, and then we partnered with another small distributor in Massachusetts. And obviously the pandemic hit a couple months later, but it didn't matter. It actually helped us. We would have been focused on throwing parties at Tao, but things just started to take off, and the momentum picked up like a hockey stick. And our velocities. This is, by the way, this is the same year that Bud Light Seltzer and Corona Seltzer launched with a collective $140 million advertising budget. We're fighting for the same shelf space, fighting for the same space on the floor. And in those three markets, we outpaced both those brands by a long shot. And next thing you know, people were hearing about it, right? Like, this is a small industry, particularly among beer wholesalers. And next thing you know, my inbox was flooded. So we basically, then we ran into the supply chain challenges that a lot of people experience with COVID. But the strategy, to your point, shifted. We had proved out, we had proof of concept in three very different markets. We had incredible velocities, we had incredible repeats, and we were solving that chicken and the egg because both wholesalers and retailers came knocking. And in fact, the guy that buys more beer and more hard seltzer than anybody in the country, at one of the biggest grocery store chains — I won't list them by name because I did that one podcast and he yelled at me — but um, he inbounded us and we missed his email. We were so inundated and we were so stretched thin because I had like 5 employees. We didn't even do a capital raise, that we were not even in a position to capitalize on all the buzz that we were generating. But yeah, the strategy shifted towards, outside of the Northeast, where we launched multiple markets. All right, we knew chains were a necessity. They're a big part, if not the vast majority part of the revenue and the volume. Well, we had a lot of their interest, and the chains that we didn't pique their interest, we would go get distribution and then pitch them. So yeah, it was a mad dash. I went from 3 distributors to — we're at about 170 over the course of essentially 2.5 years. Spent $1 million+ on those distribution agreement negotiations alone. I mean, it was just an insane undertaking. But look, most brands that partner with beer wholesalers and build this out, it usually takes decades, and we'll hopefully be nationwide by the end of this year. So we did it in 3.
That's incredible. That's amazing. That's amazing. What is it? I remember you saying that at that point you didn't raise outside capital. Um, when you did raise outside capital, what was that process like? How did you think about what type of investors you actually want on your cap table and being part of your business?
Yeah. So just to take a step back, I self-funded the first year, or 15 or so months of operations. I brought on a COO. I gave him a salary, you know, before I gave one to myself. And, when things started to take off, like I said, in 20, I mean, we went from 0 to like 6 million that first year. And we were handicapped by production. We probably would have done 15 million that first year just based on the POs we were getting from distributors. And so we were profitable out of the gate. We're still profitable today. And so my little friends and family round that I did — and I say little, I mean, I was very fortunate to raise over $1.2 million in, heading into our soft launch of 2019. Um, we, we were profitable, and all the VCs that kind of came knocking, I was like, hey, like, I don't think now's the time because we can't even produce enough of this stuff, right? Like, we're laser focused on execution. And let's face it, fundraising is a full-time job. So we were laser focused on just getting product to market. And by the time I picked my head up, it was actually fall of 2021. And we started having conversations with all the typical, early stage CPG investors. And we realized that we zoomed past their sweet spot. I'm like, 18 months earlier, you're talking to like a ZX Venture, and they're like, "Oh, come back when you've done a couple million in sales." I did 2 million in 1 month in 2021. So we zoom past the sweet spot for a lot of these early stage, seed and Series A investors. And that actually being in this weird in between zone of like venture capital and private equity, it actually wound up causing me to spin my wheels for like a year because I'm like, if we raise, I want to raise from the right partners. I want to make sure they understand our business. Most VCs don't understand alcohol, or some can't even invest in it. I spent a lot of time educating very savvy, sophisticated investors on what we're doing in alcohol because most people don't quite understand it. And yeah, at one point I'm like, screw it. We actually took out an SBA loan because we qualified because we're profitable. So that held us over for some period of time. And then by April of 22, we closed a small check. We actually even haven't even publicly announced it because we actually still might raise more on those same terms. A pretty notable CPG VC fund, and they understood what we're doing. They've been following us for like 18 months. Even though we zoom past their sweet spot, they kind of made some exceptions, and I think it was about a $3.5 million check, and then we were going to raise more, but then the macroeconomic environment caused everybody to second guess everything in summer of 2022. So we just went back to execution mode. We're like, let's not spin our wheels fundraising. Hey, the 3.5 million still sitting in our bank account. We're still profitable. Um, so it's actually been a very unusual fundraising process because most CPG brands are like hemorrhaging cash right up into the point they hope to sell.
Yeah, and it seemed like you're actually, if an investor would be interested in investing in a, alcohol beverage brand, it seems like you're in a pretty good position. You have a lot of leverage, especially considering that that you're profitable and that you've kind of zoomed past those kind of expectations, given compared to how much you've actually raised and equity you still own in the company.
Exactly. And that's, that expression, like, best time to raise money is when you don't need it. That's kind of what we did. We had an opportunity to take in a small check, and give us a little peace of mind. Um, I feel very fortunate that, yeah, we don't have we don't even have a marketing budget. So we're very unconventional.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. How do you think about growth today? And obviously we you mentioned how the macroeconomic has changed, especially when it comes to fundraising. But how has this affected your growth? Are you trying to optimize to be even more profitable, or are you trying to, hey, let's get more accounts and more accounts and really try to get this kind of gross margin up?
Yeah, no, the last 3 years have very much been like foundational years. First it was getting our feet under ourselves and understanding what the hell we're doing. Then it was very much focused on supply chain because we couldn't make enough of the stuff. I literally imported 20 million cans from Kuala Lumpur and Shanghai just to meet demand. I mean, it was quite the journey. Never thought I'd be, waiting for ships off the coast of, LA to kind of make or break my business. But that's where we found ourselves in the peak of the pandemic. Um, we, at this point, um, we're basically thinking about growth, um, as a way to kind of actually capitalize on what we built. So from our supply chain challenges that we solved, we then focused on expansion. So for like the last 2 years, I've been focused on the least sexy side of the business, which is getting all those distribution agreements signed and inked and delivered. And now we built up. Now we're building up our sales team. We just made 2 senior hires to really kind of throw gas in the fire. So if we are able to fill our retail mandates alone this year, we should quadruple our sales. But that requires us to kind of um, corral all of our wholesalers, and manage them effectively, which is really challenging, right? Like you have companies that have hundreds of people managing their distribution network. So right now, the growth is going to come down to execution. Kind of capitalizing on all of the kind of the hard work that we put in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. How also do you think about growth when it comes to expanding new SKUs? What do you think about like new categories that you either are in or want to be in?
Yeah, I mean, the fun thing about alcohol is like it's super fun to innovate. it's like the social lubricant of society, and it also, I mean, forget the TV show, the word of mouth benefits of alcohol brands is just incredible, right? Like, there's probably no better category to benefit from word of mouth. We try to set trends. We were really the first to do a light, refreshing, um, zero sugar hard tea, um, as opposed to the diabetes in a bottle that Twisted's putting out there. Hopefully, they don't listen to this and sue me. But we try to put things in cans that we want, right? So when we found ourselves drinking Aperol spritzes at restaurant, I do a little homework, and lo and behold, there's tons of sugar in Aperol. So then the question is, what can we do that satisfies that, like, light, refreshing, but fuller flavor cocktail that people are gravitating towards now, that's still like low in ABV and all that good stuff? So we launched our spritz line. We actually launched that direct to consumer to capitalize on our awareness, capitalize on the fact that it's a wine based product, and kind of be a stopgap for, like, hey, thank you for being a fan of the brand. We will get our teas to you through the traditional 3-tier system, but for now, you can buy these spritz products. And so part of some of our innovation was not only capitalizing and setting trends, but was trying to build like this omni-channel business where we could get product to people, that was going to take a couple years due to the complexities of beer distribution. So some of it is, you know, I wish I could say I anticipated the pandemic. That would make me a pretty dark human being. We launched our direct to consumer spritz in April of 20. It was perfectly timed. So we've sold, millions upon millions of direct to consumer ready to drink, cocktails and spritzes with zero marketing budget. And we launched the spritz line, and then we launched the cocktail line, the martini line. So we started. I noticed our kind of purchasing behavior when we're out with friends. Oftentimes on camera, we went from ordering Aperol spritzes to espresso martinis. And at that time, most of the world in the country had not heard or tried an espresso martini, but it was like our go-to drink. So I was like, we got to put this in a can. How the hell do we do this? And 38 iterations later, you know, out comes the very first, espresso martini in a can. And then we did the same thing for Cosmo. So yeah, it's really just trying to fill voids, set trends, but also think about, hey, we want to be selling products where consumers want to buy. And not everybody, particularly in the pandemic, was going to the store.
First of all, obviously timing could have been better, even though that wasn't the plan. But I think what's also interesting too is this idea of testing products on the DC channel, because then you can actually see, yes, you're obviously rewarding customers by, the ones that are actually visiting your site and actually you already have that relationship with. But secondly, it can then serve as kind of proof points to retail. Hey, retailers, I know that this is our hot product, our best selling product, but we have this new one that's actually selling pretty well on our website. Why don't we try it in stores and do like a limited run and see, and see how it sells? But it's selling pretty well, instead of, hey, we want to launch a new product in your store that is not proven whatsoever, but we think it could be big, right?
Trust us.
Yeah, trust us. Exactly. So
No,
no, that's
you
really cool.
nailed it. I mean, you hear a lot of CPG startups doing just that. They, use DTC to kind of innovate, test the waters, gain traction, provide proof of concept, and then you get all that data. It's actually even more important in alcohol, right? Because, like, if you have a proof of concept and you go to Whole Foods and you're just like a non-alc, tea, they could say, love it, let's go, drop ship this, and we'll hub and spoke it, and we'll be in every single Whole Foods. Can't do that in alcohol. So the need to have buy-in from wholesale and retail is essential. And what better way to facilitate that conversation when I come to them and say, I already have tens of thousands of customers. I own all that data. I have a direct relationship with them, right? Like, that's not something most alcohol, 99% of alcohol suppliers can say. They have zero direct relationship with their consumer because of the 3-tier system. So it gave us a huge leg up. When wholesalers and retailers were like, all right, we see what you're doing online. When can we get, the espresso martini and the spritz and the cocktails in store? And that was actually a big undertaking last year. We started that whole process.
I mean, also too, like, yes, you have a direct relationship with your customers, but you also know where your customers live. And what that means is that if you have, a quite a large segment in a particular region or something, then you can go to that region if you're in it and say, "Hey, actually a large subset, many of our customers love this product and they're located, in your region. So I think that you should start selling it too." So you could also capitalize it from that standpoint as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, and again, most wholesalers and retailers were not used to that type of sales pitch because of alcohol being like stuck in the Stone Ages. I could go to a wholesaler like, I just don't know if this is going to work here. I don't think anybody watches Bravo. Whatever excuse they'd want to give me, and then I call up, my team. I'm like, get me all the data, for Santa Barbara, and then I go in. I'm like, if you don't take our brand, you're literally already leaving money on the table on day one, and here's why. And literally, sometimes their minds would be blown. They're like, I don't even understand.
Yeah, exactly. And like and from your standpoint too, like you could then, obviously do like email retargeting and be for all the people in Santa Barbara and be like, "Hey, like now we're available in your stores." Like, so you can kind of drive them out there. What has it
Right. We've been collecting emails for years, and we probably have more people on our email distribution list than like Budweiser, right? Like who subscribes to Budweiser?
exactly? And probably even more importantly, it's people that are actually more engaged, right? It's not only about like the list size, but actually people that actually are more engaged with it. What was it like as well founding a business with Amanda, your girlfriend at the time, and now your wife? Was that difficult? Was like how's that been?
Yeah, so early on, it was like it was me and only me, right? I had to be the one that cut the checks. I had to be the one to walk away from my other startup. I had to be 110% all in. She was still working another job, despite being on Bravo. She's probably one of the only people to go multiple years actually working a corporate job while filming a reality show. So I'm really proud of her for accomplishing what she did. And when I convinced her to jump ship, I think it was season 4, and that was summer of 19, and yeah, it was a big step. We um, I think everybody knows that, yeah, working with your friends and your family is a sure way to complicate the inner workings of a business and a startup. But for us, it just, there was like no other way. I was just like, you're our creative director. You are the creative voice behind the brand. Um, you know, let's try to find a way to make this work. And not only did Amanda join me, but my best friend, who's also on the show, joined. I mean, Carl was like basically our first sales rep, and you know, it's been a wild ride, right? Like it's not easy, like, but having people that, that you care about surround you, when there's something to celebrate and high five and kind of pick you up when you're down in the dumps is critical. Um, Particularly in the pandemic, right? Like we were basically just confined to our New York City apartment, going through the the throes of running a beverage startup in lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine, but it's I think it's also really cool how you're able to kind of share those moments too
It ain't easy.
with your yeah, it ain't easy. It ain't easy. It ain't easy. No, no, for sure. In terms of like alcohol drinks trends in the next 3 to 5 years, and maybe taking like a drink that maybe was really popular in bars and then put like an RTD spin on those drinks. Which ones are you kind of eyeing or paying attention to currently?
I mean, we currently have 8 different sparkling hard teas. We have 3 spritzes, 2 cocktails. We have 2 more spritzes coming down the pipe, and probably a couple different cocktails. So we already have quite a bit of optionality within our portfolio. But again, I try to pay close attention to what I mean. We live in New York. There's no better nightlife than New York City in the world. So a lot of the trends, the Cosmo, the espresso martini. I mean, you probably would be hard pressed to find a spot that outpaced New York for um, being where these trends are being set in the first place. So I'm just trying to be constantly observing what people are consuming. I think that the day of like it's either a beer, wine, and spirit is over, right? So there's a blurring of the lines. This fourth category has emerged. I like to think of it as better for you, but you have lots of ready to drink cocktails that are not good for you, right? So, for me, I look to I look at what's popular. If I were to ever do something where I'm not setting a trend, I'd be like, how can I make that taste better without all the calories and carbs and sugar, right? So that's a source of innovation for me because 99% of products within alcohol still don't even have a nutrition label or the ingredients listed. And trust me, that's with good reason. A lot of lobbying power. It's not just like, oh, it's not a coincidence, right? That vodka, that tequila, guess what? It's not pure. I don't care what they're saying on the label. You want to look for stuff that has no additives and whatnot, but like even like your favorite red cab has a bunch of sugar in it, even though it's labeled as like a dry red. So we look for better for you trends that we can kind of put our own Loverboy spin on things, or we try to set a trend altogether, right? So um, it's kind of a mixed bag.
No, that's no, I appreciate you mentioning that, and it seems like in terms of the SKUs or I guess product diversification, you're in a pretty good position currently, and so maybe you aren't looking right now to add a new line, but that's cool.
Well, we'll innovate. Like we'll still do stuff. We'll do some direct to consumer drops just to kind of keep that fun spark alive. And then you never know when you're going to have a hit on your hands, right? So, yes, we're focused on taking what we've already got and executing and making sure that all right, if there is a slower moving SKU, then maybe it is on the chopping block. But then you know that DTC channel can kind of be our little lab, if you will, to kind of keep things fun and fresh.
Cool. Cool. No, that's no, makes a lot of sense. What's one book that's inspired you personally and one book that's inspired you professionally?
So I knew you were going to ask that, and I was thinking about it. And it was a no brainer on both fronts. Now I don't know if anyone's ever said either one of these two titles, but on the professional side, the Challenger Sale. Um, I read that book uh, going into a job interview. It was like my one little stint where I wasn't working for myself. I was going to help run enterprise sales at ZocDoc. I never sold anything in the healthcare space, never sold, B2B enterprise. And I just needed to reset how I think about my selling strategy, if you will. The Challenger Sales, or every entrepreneur or anybody in business for that matter should read this book because I don't care what you're doing, you got to sell something to somebody. And the Challenger Sale flips the traditional mindset that solution selling is the key, and really flips it on its head. And you basically have to challenge your prospective customer and really kind of challenge their thinking and challenge the status quo to give them that epiphany aha moment where they realize, oh my god, I gotta buy Loverboy, it solves all my problems. So the Challenger Sale, I could not recommend it enough. I made my whole entire sales team read it. It's an incredibly powerful book.
You are very original, Kyle. No one's mentioned the Challenger sale. So you're very, very original. Very original. Yeah.
It is the best selling book out there. Not that I've read a lot of them because I'm like, this is the one. I don't need to read any other one. Um, on the personal side, I think we were like in the thick of COVID, and I got my hands on David Goggins' "Can't Hurt Me." Yeah, I'm sure some people have mentioned that one before.
I think that you're actually again pretty original. I don't think that we've had another person bring up Can't Hurt Me, but it's a great one.
I've never been more inspired in my entire life. And I started listening to this when I was trying to get into a running routine because we couldn't go into the gyms. And I'm trying to stay in shape and I'm going crazy in my New York City apartment. And I started listening to his book. I think I crushed it in like 4 days. And I listened to it while running. And you basically are like, oh my God, I am a little bitch. Like, no excuses. Like, it is like a game changing book in terms of like really kind of digging down deep and figuring out what kind of person you really are. So, both of those books were pretty game changing for me.
You should read the text message that David sent to Joe Rogan on Joe Rogan's birthday. Joe Rogan like reads it aloud on his podcast. If you search it like David Goggins text message Joe Rogan on his birthday, like it's pretty crazy, pretty crazy.
I actually
But yeah,
recommend I recommend reading Can't Hurt Me via the audiobook because first of all, David Goggins' voice is absolutely insane. He's not the narrator. But the reason why it's so incredible, the guy that helped him write the book is actually the one reading it. But then after each chapter, they do this debrief that you don't get if you read the physical book.
Okay.
So you kind of get like Goggins' like reaction or perspective to the chapter, and he gives you some color on it that you don't get if you just read the print. And then you hear it's just like amazing to hear them kind of go back and forth.
Cool. I'll definitely check out the audiobook then. That's awesome. This is great. Kyle, this has been so much fun. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Mike. So much fun. Thank you so much. Cheers, buddy.
And there you have it. It was such a pleasure chatting with Kyle. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you're enjoying the show, highly recommend subscribing to the newsletter at theconsumervc.com, where you'll receive all new episodes straight to your inbox, as well as a weekly recap of all consumer deals. Thanks. Have a good one.